Time is just a concept, obviously, though it doesn't stop one from attaching significance to specific dates, specific times even. Nobody seems to recall the day, let alone the time, Alice's pond swallowed its first victim. That poor, poor soul. Sometimes we ponder, most of us don't, of being the first person afflicted with a new disease. For example, the first person who caught the Black Death, scared, confused, maybe even a little guilty. Alice's pond will beckon you, call your name. It sits behind a mask, a facade of cool, clear water, surrounded by lush greenery, unlike any sickness which precedes it. For most of us, it's easy to avoid such things as we navigate through our lives. We are creatures of habit, obviously. We know that those things, the diseases and afflictions, sit behind a thin veil of putrid rot, lurking in the corner of the hoarder's house or the chemical plants, toiling in a disgusting, muddled mess. These things are well known, a constant in human history. Alice's pond is an epiphany to the madman, lost in his insanity, a blip on the ever-blank radar. There was no guilt, no fight, when the others followed the first victim, followed her into the unknown, giving into its will, its call. On the first day, within the first hour, it had swallowed no less than a dozen. Their eyes were blank, expressionless as they took that first step. The water would swell and darken. The first step, there would be ankle deep. Then the next step, knee deep. Finally, on the third and last step, they would disappear. We tried to stop them. We grabbed at their arms, their hands, which were cold and wet. Even the most intelligent of the townspeople were impossible to reason with. Even the weakest, most frail of the bunch were too strong to keep them from the depths. They were robots, slaves to its calls. We had managed to stop one woman, pulling her back from the water's edge. She was inconsolable, though her eyes were void of any activity. The tears flowed. The poor lady didn't make it a night. We were awoken by perpetual thuds originating from her tent, the medical tent. When we found her, dear God, she had beaten her skull in with a hammer. I almost wish we had allowed her to go. Maybe something better lied beneath. Myself and a few others had set up the camp on the other side of town, just outside of its reach, the reach of Alice's pond. Even here, a mile away, you could hear its whispers, its pleas. I believe we're the last ones left of the town formerly known as Griffin's Way. There are 7 of us, 7 of the 2,000, which our community was composed of. April 14th, as I said, was not the day in which the first victim was claimed. April 14th is today, the day I made my final walk into Alice's pond. Human civilization evolved on the backs of the thinkers, those who thought outside the box, those who dared to face what they feared the most. Perhaps my plan is just an excuse to succumb, to give in to its fervent cries. I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't enticing at times. We set off from the camp, leaving the warmth of the known and voyaging into the cold depths of the unknown. The pond wasn't far off when we saw the first being, the first creature. It tilted and swayed as it trudged forward like a newborn taking its first steps. Human beings have 2 arms and 2 legs to the best of my recollection. The creature which I saw today, the creature which emerged from Alice's pond, had far more. I'm not sure what happens to those who yield to the calls of the pond, and I damn sure don't to know what happens to them once they submerge beneath it. But I do know one thing. Whatever emerges from its depths are no longer human, no longer one of us. I shouldn't have gone into my dad's room that night. My dad and I are somewhat close. Our mom comes to visit us once every year, so most of my company is my dad. Ever since my mom and dad split, whenever she visited, she looked different. That day, I was eating my favorite dish that my dad had just cooked. He put down a plate beside me, but never sat down to eat. A faint moan came from his room. He said that he had an urgent job and rushed to his room. I was always told to mind my own business and not go into my dad's room, ever. But today, something kept telling me to look inside. After I was sure my dad was asleep, I tried to open his door, but of course it was locked. It had a code, instead of a key like most doors. I had seen the code years ago, but kept it in memory. 258418. I entered the code. The door opened. My dad wasn't there, but I saw legs, and as I looked up, I saw the hanging body of my mom, the rope gripping her neck tightly. I ran and tried to pull her down, but it only made it worse. I started to cry when I realized she wasn't moving. This was too much for me to take, and I fell to the floor. While still pulling on my mom's legs, I passed out. I woke up in the same room, now feeling uncomfortable. I almost had a heart attack when the dead body of my mother was positioned right in front of my face. I held my mom and cried, reminiscing the times we were close and happy. I then heard footsteps. It's time you get to feel the extraordinary experience that your mother felt years ago. What the fuck are you doing, Dad? Why are you acting like this? From the afar view, I could see a shiny object in his hands. I knew exactly what it was. I've enjoyed doing research for years, experimenting on lab rats like your mom, people who deserve to die. Your mom was advised, the same as you, to never enter my room, but she did, and I had to make sure the truth was sealed. Whoever your mom was isn't your mom. She's a hired actor who looks like your mom. This is a joke, right? Since when were jokes this intense? He threw the knife at me. It went flying into my head. I started getting dizzy and eventually passed out. I woke up in the hospital and saw the doctors discussing me. I don't recall much after that, but then I was put in a mental facility because I wouldn't stop believing my mom was dead and kept fighting the doctors or hurting them badly. I am now out of the facility. Apparently my dad got arrested after that, but I still can't stop believing that she's still alive and he's still out there. Another night of insomnia, endless thinking as the universe shifts and everyone's sleep lifts. I still search for a way to end my sleepless nights, dying to find a way to be normal. It's like an illness. It doesn't disturb you when you think about it, but when you realize that the side effects are pretty messed up. As the rain plipped and plopped, each raindrop hitting the petals and leaves were so vivid and memorable. I still remember that night like it was yesterday. The following day I noticed a pattern of weather and incidents. Every night when I would go to sleep at 3 to 4 a.m., it would rain or get really cloudy and cold. Nights when I dozed off at 5 a.m., it would thunder heavily with faint rain, and nights I slept at 2 a.m., the weather would be clear or sparsely cloudy. It was then, that night, I realized maybe my insomnia wasn't just an illness, but something more sinister. Why every night at exactly 2:43 a.m. there will be a faint noise of clicks and tapping, along with seemingly random, tiny shines of light through the window, barely visible to the naked eye. Why every night the woman who is supposed to be my mother crawls and screams in the backyard at exactly 4 a.m. But now today I finally found an answer to these questions. Obviously the tapping and clicking was probably just the water tap I always forget to close. But the screaming? I can logically back it up, but I'm still confused as to how it's possible. How can my mother scream and crawl in the backyard at night when I carefully buried her under the soil very, very deep so she never got out? My job, my calling, is to give second chances, Or perhaps that's just a product of my work. I'm a tutor. That's my title. That's my purpose. I don't think it's fair to give titles to reduce someone's why into a microcosm of what it truly is. I love what I do, and I do more than what my title implies. I rebirth these children. I give them life once more, or rather a reason to continue the one they have. The unfortunate ones who come my way, who sit across from me, are shells, an empty vessel that was once an Eden. They've been reduced, not unusually by outside forces, not unusually by the ones who they trust the most, to a slobbering heap. I can fix them. I always do. I couldn't fix this one. She was so shy, so nervous, always pulling at the stringy blonde tendrils, which sat in stiff heaps on her small head. Her home, her dwelling, was unnerving in its decadence, a stark contrast from the filthy pigsties I usually found myself drawn to. Katie. I yearned to help her, to fix her, though her regression even in my presence was immense. She loved to paint nails, fake ones, the ones that you could buy in volume. They were perpetually strewn about her desk, some so thickly layered that they bent and twisted like palaces of colorful, melted candle wax. Her blue eyes pierced into mine, burning a hole in my retinas. I can't see. I can't feel anymore. The world goes black. I wake up. I return to the realm of the living. The glass of water I had been offered was empty. My fingers throb. They burn and bleed with immense pain. My fingernails are gone, torn from the seams. Katie's painting my nails.